The Battle of Singapore stands as one of the most devastating defeats in British military history, a moment that shook the foundations of the British Empire. It took place from the 8th to the 15th of February 1942 during the height of World War II, a conflict that engulfed the globe. The battle marked the fall of Singapore to the Empire of Japan, a significant victory for the Japanese forces. The loss of Singapore was unexpected and swift, catching the British forces by surprise. The battle began with the Japanese invasion of the Malay Peninsula, a strategic move that set the stage for the fall of Singapore. They moved swiftly down the peninsula towards Singapore, overcoming any resistance in their path. The British and Commonwealth forces were caught off guard, unprepared for the speed and ferocity of the Japanese advance. The defenders were overwhelmed by the Japanese tactics and superior air power, which played a crucial role in their victory. The battle ended with the surrender of Singapore to the Japanese forces, a moment that marked a significant shift in the war. The fall of Singapore was a turning point in the war in the Pacific, altering the balance of power in the region. It demonstrated the vulnerability of the British Empire in the Far East, exposing weaknesses that had been previously overlooked. Over 80,000 British, Indian and Australian troops became prisoners of war, a staggering number that highlighted the scale of the defeat. The capture of Singapore gave Japan a strategic base for their operations in Southeast Asia, bolstering their military presence in the region. The Battle of Singapore remains a stark reminder of the unpredictability of war, a lesson in the harsh realities of military conflict. Singapore held immense strategic importance during World War II, serving as a linchpin in the defense strategy of the British Empire in the region. It was often referred to as the Gibraltar of the East due to its formidable defences and strategic location. The island was a key British military base in Southeast Asia, housing thousands of troops and military equipment. Its location at the southern tip of the Malay Peninsula made it crucial for controlling maritime routes. It controlled the Strait of Malacca, a vital shipping route that was essential for the movement of goods and military supplies. This route connected the Indian Ocean to the South China Sea and the broader Pacific Ocean, making it a critical juncture for global trade. The British had invested heavily in Singapore's defences, constructing extensive fortifications and military installations. They built a massive naval base on the island, equipped with state-of-the-art facilities and infrastructure. This base was designed to be a stronghold against any potential Japanese aggression, serving as a deterrent to enemy forces. The British believed that Singapore was impregnable, a fortress that could withstand any attack. Singapore was also important economically, acting as a major centre for commerce and trade in the region. It was a major trading hub in the region, facilitating the exchange of goods between East and West. The island was rich in natural resources, particularly rubber and tin, which were highly valuable commodities at the time. Controlling Singapore meant controlling these valuable commodities, which were essential for the war effort. The fall of Singapore would have far-reaching consequences, altering the balance of power in the region. The strategic importance of Singapore made its loss all the more devastating for the Allied forces, marking a significant turning point in the war. The events leading up to the Battle of Singapore began in early December 1941, a time of great tension and uncertainty in the Pacific. On December 8th, Japanese forces landed on the northeast coast of Malaya, marking the beginning of their aggressive campaign in Southeast Asia. This invasion occurred just hours after the devastating attack on Pearl Harbor, which had already shocked the world. The Japanese advance down the Malay Peninsula was swift and decisive, demonstrating their well-coordinated military strategy. They used bicycles and light tanks to move quickly through the dense Malayan jungle, surprising the Allied forces with their mobility. The British and Commonwealth forces were caught unprepared, struggling to mount an effective defence. They had expected any attack to come from the sea, not anticipating a land invasion from the north. Instead, the Japanese came from the north, advancing relentlessly through the Malay Peninsula towards the British strongholds. The defenders were pushed back steadily, unable to halt the Japanese momentum. By the end of January 1942, the situation was dire for the defenders. with their resources and morale severely depleted. The Japanese had reached the southern tip of the Malay Peninsula, positioning themselves for the final assault. They were now poised to attack Singapore itself, the jewel of the British Empire in the east. The stage was now set for one of the most decisive and dramatic battles of World War II in the Pacific, a confrontation that would change the course of the war. The Battle of Singapore officially began on February 8, 1942. The Japanese launched their assault across the Johor Strait. They used small boats and rafts to cross the water. The British had expected the main attack to come from the east. Instead, the Japanese focused their efforts on the northwest of the island. This area was less well defended. The Japanese managed to establish a beachhead on Singapore Island. They quickly expanded their foothold. The defenders were caught off guard by the speed and ferocity of the attack. The Japanese pushed inland, capturing key positions and resources. One of the critical factors in the battle was air superiority. The Japanese had complete control of the skies. They used this advantage to devastating effect. Japanese planes bombed and strafed Allied positions relentlessly. The Japanese invasion had begun with overwhelming force and precision. Section 5. The Fall of Singapore. As the Japanese advanced across Singapore Island, the situation for the defenders became increasingly desperate. The British and Commonwealth forces were pushed back towards the city centre. They were running low on supplies and ammunition. Morale was rapidly declining among both troops and civilians. On February 15, 1942, Lieutenant General Percival made the difficult decision to surrender. He met with the Japanese commander, Lieutenant General Tomoyuki Yamashita, at the Ford Motor Factory. Here, Percival signed the surrender document. It was the largest surrender of British-led forces in history. The speed of the Japanese victory was astounding. Singapore, which had been considered impregnable, had fallen in just over a week. Section 6. Casualties and prisoners of war. The Battle of Singapore resulted in heavy casualties on both sides. The exact numbers are still debated by historians. However, it's estimated that around 5,000 Allied troops were killed or wounded during the battle. Japanese casualties were likely similar, with around 3,500 killed or wounded. However, the true scale of the disaster was in the number of prisoners taken. Approximately 80,000 British, Indian, and Australian troops became prisoners of war. This was in addition to the 50,000 taken prisoner during the Malayan campaign. The civilian population also suffered greatly. Many were killed during the battle, either by bombing or in the chaotic aftermath. Thousands more died in the subsequent Japanese occupation. Section 7. Life in Japanese concentration camps. The prisoners of war captured at Singapore faced a brutal existence in Japanese concentration camps. These camps were spread across Southeast Asia and Japan. The most notorious was the Changi prison in Singapore. It became a symbol of the suffering endured by Allied prisoners. Conditions in the camps were appalling. Prisoners faced overcrowding, malnutrition, and disease. They were forced to work long hours in harsh conditions. Many were sent to work on the Burma-Thailand Railway, known as the Death Railway. The work was extremely dangerous, and many prisoners died from exhaustion, disease, or accidents. The Japanese guards were often cruel and brutal. Beatings and torture were common. Medical care in the camps was minimal. Section 8. The Changi Prison Experience. Changi Prison became one of the most infamous Japanese prison camps of World War II. It was originally built to hold about 600 inmates. During the Japanese occupation, it held up to 50,000 Allied prisoners. The overcrowding was extreme and conditions were dire. Prisoners at Changi faced a constant struggle for survival. Food was scarce and of poor quality. Many prisoners suffered from malnutrition and related diseases. Despite the harsh conditions, prisoners at Changi showed remarkable resilience. They organized their own systems of governance and discipline. They set up hospitals, schools, and even theaters. The Changi prison experience became a powerful symbol of the suffering endured by prisoners of war in the Pacific theater. Section 9. Long-term impact on Allied forces. The fall of Singapore had a profound impact on the Allied war effort. It was a severe blow to British prestige and morale. The loss of such a significant base hampered Allied operations in Southeast Asia. It gave Japan a strategic foothold in the region. The capture of so many Allied troops as prisoners of war was a significant loss. These were experienced soldiers who could not be easily replaced. Their absence was felt in subsequent campaigns. The psychological impact on the Allied forces was also significant. The myth of British invincibility in Asia was shattered. The fall of Singapore led to changes in Allied strategy. It highlighted the need for better coordination between Allied nations. The United States took on a more prominent role in the Pacific theater. Section 10. Conclusion. Lessons from the Battle of Singapore. The Battle of Singapore stands as a stark reminder of the unpredictability of war. It demonstrates the dangers of overconfidence and poor preparation. The British belief in the impregnability of Singapore proved to be a fatal flaw. The battle also highlights the importance of adaptability in warfare. The Japanese used innovative tactics, such as bicycle infantry and light tanks. The British, in contrast, were slow to adapt to the realities of jungle warfare. The treatment of prisoners of war during and after the battle remains a contentious issue. It serves as a grim reminder of the brutality of war. The lessons of Singapore continue to be studied by military strategists and historians to this day.